24 million people watch Thursday night's debate. It's nothing compared to the debate that's been going on up in here. The biggest audience these Republican contenders have ever had, and they wanted to introduce themselves, not just their policies, but their stories, their background, to those 24 million people. And there was definitely, let's call it a common theme.
I'm proud of my dad, and I'm certainly proud of my brother. In Florida, they call me Jeb, because I earned it.
My dad came home from serving in the Army after having lost his father, worked in the Breyers ice cream plant in Newark, New Jersey.
I'm the son of a pastor and an evangelist. I will keep my word. My father fled Cuba, and I will fight to defend liberty because my family knows what it's like to lose it.
Well, Megan, my father was a mailman. His father was a coal miner.
Both of my parents were born into poor families on the island of Cuba. My father was a bartender. And the journey from the back of that bar to this stage tonight, to me, that's the essence of the American dream.
I can't even really make fun because I almost always start stories with my dad and my mom, right? I mean, it is part of the way we introduce ourselves. But I wonder what that tells us about what those candidates thought this debate was.
Again, they are trying to appeal to their base, working class, older male, in this case white male, or Latino Cuban, in this case with Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. They're trying to send a message to their primary base. But if we're talking about daddy issues, Rand Paul and his father's son, he's not a real Republican, he's a libertarian.
Right.
The same as Rand Paul. So,
right, he just ends up in the Republican Party because the Democratic Party is too far flung, but really he's in a whole different category.
He has a different speech.
But take the politics out of it for a second. I mean, isn't it beautiful that all of these men had fathers in their lives that made this kind of mark, that evoked this kind of affection? I look at this, I mean, it propelled all of them to run for the highest office in the land. We started at the start of the show talking about, do Black Lives Matter? I think daddies matter, and I think these guys are all testaments of how important it is to have a father in your life, and especially when we know that the #1 predictor of poverty is not having an active father in your life.
And Rachel,
I'm sorry. That's actually not quite what the predictor of poverty is. It actually has to do with dual-income households not having active parenting.
Let's talk about.
Well, no. I just want to clarify that the data is different, because I think part of what's important, and I think this is part of what you were emphasizing initially, because I also want to point out that poor daddies matter, right? So what I don't want to do is to reduce the role that fathers can bring to the lives of any child is their paycheck.
Ted Cruz brought that up. Let's talk. That was a powerful story. His father left. There was hope and redemption. He came back. But the point of daddies is they have to stick around, and they have to stick around, and
sometimes they don't stick around, and you end up with a two-term Democratic president.
Let's get back to the debate.
Problems.
The debate, though, is like a lot of them are introducing themselves to the Republican Party primary voters for the first time in many ways, right? And so you have to come up with an origin story. So everyone's going back to this sort of 2004, my son of a coal miner narrative that we saw within the Democratic Party.
That didn't turn out well when Daddy cried.
But you know, I mean, I'm always fascinated by, my dad was a mailman, my dad was a coal miner, because, thinking about the Black Lives Matter movement, many blacks weren't even afforded opportunities to be mailmen or coal miners or all.
Well, but I would also just like to point out on the Black Lives Matter movement, because I think this gets lost in our discussion about how important black fathers are, that the black fathers of the boys and young men who have been shot and killed by police were almost all active members of their lives, beginning with Trayvon Martin, who, despite the fact that his parents were divorced, had been and was right at that moment actively, lovingly parenting that child. And so while black fathers do matter in many ways, I have one that matters, they are not sufficient bulletproof against a system right. And so I just want to say, yes, of course,
a system that disincentivizes marriage, a system that creates webs of dependency.
Well, I don't know if Tamir Rice getting shot on a playground is about disincentive.
They're talking about their fathers the same way that Hillary Clinton is talking about her
mother. That's right. They're saying these are the role models. You can expect something from me that comes from this space.
But you put the politics to it. Obviously, some of the appeal of Donald Trump is the political correctness, and he's not a politician. Ben Carson, not a politician. Not politicians. And how do you do it? You introduce yourself as a normal person, where you came from. That's the politics of telling your personal story.
Can I play just for a second Scott Walker saying something about his normality? Because it was kind of funny. Let's just listen to it as we go out. And let me just say, I want to say thank you to Juan Manuel Benitez and to Rachel Campos-Duffy. Christina and Caden are going to stick around in our next hour. And up next, a preview of my exclusive interview with Attorney General Loretta Lynch. When we go out, we just have to listen to Scott Walker for a second as we go.
I'm a guy with a wife and 2 kids and a Harley. One article called me aggressively normal.